Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, it is Crossover Thursday. Well, what does that mean? That means we take a look at the next team on the schedule for the Silver and Black, and that's the LA Chargers. So we'll talk all things Chargers, all things Raiders on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, September 28th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And, of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, as always, thank you. We appreciate you in a major way, and we definitely appreciate my man, Ari. He does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, and we're sounding good. There would be no show without you, and there would be no show on YouTube without him. So many thanks to Ari, and many thanks to you, Raider Nation. If you want to hit up Ari on Twitter, you can. Shout him out or whatever the case may be. At Ari Produces. You can shout me out if you want at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. I won't have any calls or texts on today's show, even though I got a ton of feedback. Want to get as much in as possible. We'll get back to that on Friday, but it is the crossover edition, so we don't have any time for calls and texts because we have 3 segments of crossover. David Droegemeier, one of the hosts of Locked On Chargers, will join the show. We'll talk all things storylines. We'll talk all things matchups, and we'll talk about how each team will have an opportunity to win this game on Sunday and improve their overall record to 2-2. So that's going to take up the majority of the show. We'll get back to calls and texts coming up on Friday's show as we close out the week really strong. Before we get into any of the crossover, though, I do want to give you news and notes, just a couple little nuggets that I have for you. Before I do any of that, though, I want to let you know that today's crossover edition is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code, all lowercase, Locked On NFL for our first deposit match up to $100. I'll tell you a lot more about them later on in the show, but let's go ahead and jump into a few little nuggets that I have here. And the first one is a Jimmy Garoppolo update. Of course, a lot of folks are paying attention. We all know that Jimmy G is in the concussion protocol. Will he be available on Sunday? Will it be Brian Hoyer? Will it be Aiden O'Connell? Of course, that's the subject of big-time conversation, not only here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, but amongst Raider Nation in a major, major way. So Jeremy Fowler from ESPN tweeted out on Wednesday that the Raiders have been optimistic about Jimmy Garoppolo's availability for Week 4. He's got to pass through concussion protocol stages, but there's a feeling he can make it back for the Chargers game, barring a surprise. So then when we met with Coach McDaniels at the Intermountain Health Performance Center on Wednesday, we asked him about his availability, and he said Jimmy G is doing good, progressing through the concussion protocol so far this week. Now, he cannot fast track him, right? He's got to clear all the concussion protocols. When he does, then he'll be cleared to play if they so and choose to put him out there. Now, he was around the building. He's in the meeting room, so that's a good sign. It sounds like that things are on the right path as far as I'm concerned, because I do still believe that the best opportunity for the Raiders to win right now, which I think is all that matters, is having Jimmy G under center. I know everyone doesn't agree with me on that, and that's okay, right? We can have that discussion later, but it sounds like Jimmy G is progressing so that he'll be available to play on Sunday if the Raiders do, in fact, choose to put him out there. So there's that. Also wanted to go over the injury report real quick for the Raiders and the Chargers from Wednesday. Of course, we'll get another injury report later on today, another one on Friday, and then 90 minutes before kickoff, we'll find out who's active and who's inactive. So going over the injury report real quick for the Chargers, it's much longer than it is for the Raiders. All these guys did not participate. Joey Bosa, Gerald Everett, Alohi Gilman, Derwin James Sr., Corey Linsley, Khalil Mack, and Kenneth Murray Jr. And only Khalil Mack was out because of rest. Everyone else was out because of injury. Bosa, hamstring and a toe. Gerald Everett because of an illness. Gilman, the safety, because of a heel. Derwin James because of a hamstring. Linsley because of an illness. As I said, Mack was he rested. Kenneth Murray because of a groin. I mean, there's a lot of guys on that list. Also limited, Austin Eckler with the ankle injury. Eric Kendricks, the linebacker, with the hamstring injury was limited. And also tackle Rashawn Slater with the ankle injury was also limited. So a pretty big laundry list of guys for the Chargers. I'm sure that that'll get cleaned up on Thursday and then more cleaned up on Friday, and then we'll have a better idea. But as of Wednesday, that's what the injury report looked like. For the Raiders, it's much shorter. guys that didn't participate, only 2 of them. Curtis Bolton, the linebacker, with a knee injury, and then Jimmy Garoppolo dealing with the concussion. And we knew he couldn't participate. All he could do is go through the meetings part of practice. Limited guys, Jacorian Bennett with the hamstring injury. Max Crosby, that's a pretty notable one, right? With the knee injury, he was limited. And then Roderick Teamer with an Achilles injury was limited. But that's it for the Silver and Black. Again, we'll get another report Thursday, Friday, and then we'll find out 90 minutes before kickoff who's in and who's out. One more little nugget, then we'll get into part 1 of the crossover edition with David Droegemeier, one of the hosts of Locked On Chargers. And this is a practice squad note. The Raiders signed Malik Reed, linebacker Malik Reed, to the practice squad, and the note on him was he has 16 career sacks in 59 games split between the Broncos and the Steelers, and they go on to say the Raiders are hoping that Reed can help create pressure on the quarterback alongside Max Crosby, but Reed will first have to get up to speed on the practice squad to earn a promotion to the 53-man roster. So a little bit of a practice squad note right there. Linebacker Malik Reed is now signed to the Silver and Blacks practice squad. So that's all I got for you for news and notes, a little bit of nuggets I have here for you. So let's go ahead and jump into part 1 of the crossover edition. David Droegemeier, one of the hosts of Locked On Chargers, joins the show. We're going to talk all things storylines. What's the major storyline between the Chargers? What's the major storyline between the Raiders? That comes up right here in part 1 of the crossover edition on the Locked On Raiders podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Crossover Thursday. It is David Droegemeier, co-host of Locked On Chargers, joined by the Locked On Raiders host, your boy Q, one of the best hosts on the Locked On podcast network here. And we're going to get into this game, man. This is one of the longest storied rivalries in the history of the National Football League. So this is going to be an exciting one. We're going to go over the biggest storylines, the key matchups, and what each team needs to do to win this football game. But first, this Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use all lowercase code LockedOnNFL for that first deposit match up to $100. All right, your boy Q, let's get into it, man. Biggest storylines for this one. You're the visitor, so I'll let you kick things off. What's the biggest storyline surrounding the Raiders?
Well, they haven't really got their offense going so far this season, right? I mean, 17 points, 10 points, and 18 points. And this is a team that I looked at all the weapons and Jimmy G being familiar with Josh McDaniels and thinking, all right, the strength of this Raiders team this year is going to be the offense, right? Now, the defense is going to have to step up and play some ball, but their offense is not going to really struggle. Well, so far they struggled, and they can't get the running game going, right? The leading rusher in the league in 2022, Josh Jacobs has not got going. He hasn't had 100-yard rushing, and hell, in week 2, he had -2 yards rushing. I mean, so there's been a lot of struggles so far offensively. And I mean, Jimmy G's in concussion protocol right now. So I guess you could say that that's a side story, who's going to end up starting. I think it's going to be Jimmy G. It sounds like he's trending in the right direction. But honestly, I think the biggest storyline is where in the hell is the Raiders offense? It's almost like, where's Waldo? Where's the Raiders offense? Where's this genius, play calling that we thought we were going to see this year with all the right guys in place for head coach Josh McDaniels? And it just hasn't been there. It's been the Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers show. And outside of that, it's really a whole lot of nothing. So for me, I think, in the Raiders, it's got to be, where's the offense and can they come alive at some point? And it's strange to say that with all the weapons that they have. But, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest storyline for the Silver and Black.
For Josh Jacobs, I think one of the things I've noticed kind of watching the first couple of games of the Raiders season is it seems like he's just not running with that same intensity, with that same explosiveness. Do you think him missing some time in the offseason with the whole contract situation has kind of, led to this slow start to the season?
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that, right? I think that the offensive line's not playing as physical as they're supposed to. That's something that the great Lincoln Kennedy pointed out to me as well. He was like, Hugh, the offensive line is just not – physicality is not there, right? And so that's just about attitude and want to, and they don't seem like they want to be that physical team, that one that just kind of says, hey, get behind me, I'm going to go ahead and punch this thing in or get that first down. It just doesn't seem like it's there. And I do think some of it has to do with Josh Jacobs not being there in camp, and the timing's not really quite right with the offensive line. There's a new player on that offensive line, and Greg Van Roten taking over at the right guard spot. Illuminor is holding down the right tackle spot, and he was in and out of the lineup last season. So I do think that some of the familiarity and the timing and the physicality is just not there yet. Maybe they'll get it going this week. I don't know, but it seemed like a little bit. Sunday Night Football got going a little bit towards the end of the game, but it was too little too late at that point. So, I think there's all of that element kind of plays a role in why the run game hasn't got going on. But, I mean, for the Chargers, what's the storyline looking like for you?
Yeah, storyline over here is, they got the big win last week to prevent them from going 0-3, which is huge, and I think everybody knows that's a a death sentence. If you get to 0-3, you pretty much have no chance of making it to the playoffs. So that was big. And honestly, I think the storyline is you still need to win this one. I mean, this is such an important game. It's incredibly important because the Chargers, first of all, it's the first division matchup for the Chargers, first AFC West opponent they're going to play this year. You know, those games count as kind of like 2 or 2.5. And also, with the way that the Chargers defense has played through the first 3 games of this season, I think it's really, it's important to win this football game with an emphasis on the defense needs to perform better. And it's really the back end secondary guys giving up way too many explosive plays, and also the penalties on third down. Especially, they have the most third down penalties in the league, and it's been killer. It has been absolutely killer. It's drive extenders for the other team, and the Chargers have really beaten themselves a lot. But that back end of that secondary has definitely been a little bit banged up, and quite frankly, has just underperformed.
How surprised are you that the defense is not playing at the level that it should be playing? There's names there. There's guys there. There's dudes that I consider dudes, right? That are go-getters that can go and make plays. How shocked are you that the defense hasn't started clicking yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's been very frustrating because, this is year 3 of Brandon Staley's system. And, the first year, okay, I kind of understand it. You're coming into a new situation. You got a new scheme. You don't really have the players to run your scheme the way that you want to. Year 2, you make all of those additions to try to bring in the type of guys that run your scheme most effectively, and still didn't really get the results until towards the back end of the year where you're playing some weaker opponents. You had some good performances, but the Chargers have yet to, in the Brandon Staley era, really, save for the Miami Dolphins game, stepped up to the occasion and really taken down and beaten a very, very good football team. And a lot of that has been the inconsistencies on the back end, and that's kind of reared its ugly head so far this season. I think at least it's encouraging that the Chargers pass rush has started to come alive the last 2 games. Yeah. They've been able to get into those more of those third and long situations where they've been able to deploy Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and the rookie Tuli Tuipulotu has been an absolute Tasmanian devil. They've been kind of moving him around. He's been roaming around the line, trying to kind of find the best gap or the best opportunity, and also a very selfless player. He's taken on, 2 offensive linemen to free things up, run some games with Joey Bosa, and he's been incredibly effective. He's been very disruptive, and he's also held up against the run, which it's so surprising for a kid that's coming into the league that's 21 years old, literally coming in and playing grown man football. He's been a very, very exciting player and a very, just awesome pick for the Chargers coming into this one where they knew coming off of last year with the injuries to their pass rushers that they were going to have to address that and address it with a high pick. Seems like the choice that they made was a good one.
Yeah, it sounds like, and I know there's a lot of Raider Nation that wanted that player as well, right? A lot of Raider Nation in the draft process was like, hey, that could be the guy. And clearly they were right? And obviously the Chargers are benefiting from that. And to have kind of a 3-headed monster now at that, at that rush position, that's got to be a nice benefit. What does it look like as far as, slowing down the run or stopping the run? Is that been a little bit better, or is it just still kind of a struggle?
It's been a little bit better. I mean, the last year, it's hard to get much worse than they were last year. They were giving up almost 5.5 yards per carry and over 150 rushing yards per game. Right now, the defense has given up around 113 rushing yards per game. So a pretty significant improvement, but it's just been about the offenses that they've gone up against. I think one thing that's been encouraging, at least, is when you had to go up against a team where you knew they were going to run the ball down your throat, in the Tennessee Titans with King Henry and Tajay Spears, that they were able to at least control Derrick Henry and not allow him to impose his will and really take over the football game. That was an encouraging performance. I still need to see it over the course of a couple of more games before I'm any kind of a believer in this run defense. But I think it's definitely steps in the right direction. I still need to see it against a legit rusher. They're obviously going to have that opportunity going up against Josh Jacobs, the rushing leader of last year.
Yeah, no, it's, it should be interesting. It's funny just talking about these storylines, and I'm talking about the Raiders' offense is struggling. You're talking about the Chargers' defense has struggled. Well, I guess, what's the better evil in this situation, right? Can the Raiders' offense get right? Can the Chargers' defense get right in this game? I guess this will be the opportunity that we find out what it really looks like, right?
Absolutely. We're going to find out. It's going to be something's got to give, right? Something's got to give. So I'm interested to see, like, first of all, who's going to play quarterback for the Raiders on Sunday, and if it's going to be Jimmy G, and if it's not Jimmy G, is it going to be the rookie or is it going to be Hoyer? That's an interesting decision.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's a discussion we've been having a lot around here, talking about, who it is, who's going to be. And a lot of Raider Nation wants to see the rookie. But I kind of caution, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that in week 4, if you pass it to the rookie, you've got to continue to let the rookie ride. You got to go ahead and say, all right, it's your show. Let's see what you got. I think that week 4 is too early, especially if Jimmy G is available to come back. Then you put him back in there. If he's only going to be out for a little bit of time, like a week, I think it makes more sense to go with Brian Hoyer because he probably gives you the best chance to win right now. But later on in the season, I would say that, go ahead and pass it to Aiden O'Connell. But I don't know. My gut feeling tells me that Jimmy G is going to go on Sunday, but that's just my gut feeling. And talking to Coach McDaniels on Wednesday, he said that he's progressing pretty nicely through the concussion protocol, but obviously he's got to pass the protocol before he's able to play. So we'll see. We'll see what it looks like. But my gut feeling tells me it's going to be Jimmy G. So there's part 1 of the crossover edition right there. David Droegemeier from Locked On Chargers and myself talking about the biggest storylines in this game coming up on Sunday. So what will be the biggest matchups? We're going to give you a couple each. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2, and we'll do it after I tell you about Harry's. And fellas, no matter why you shave, Harry's has you covered for the best shave of your life at a price you're going to love. From their legendary high-quality razors to skin products like exfoliating face wash and hydrating lotion, Harry's gives you a premium shave without the premium price tag. Get better quality and a better price than other razors when you get Harry's delivered right to your door. The thing about it is, Harry's is so affordable. The starter set, it's a $13 value. You get it for $3. Harrys.com/NFL, $3. It includes a 5-blade German engineer razor, weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover. $3. Again, $3. Scheduled delivery for refills as low as $2. Half what you pay for other blades. $3 and $2, that is absolutely nothing. And Harry's has a lot more than that. Creams, washes, lotions, they'll keep your skin healthy and hydrated. Blades made in their own factory in Germany that stay sharp. Guys who tried it say that their 8th shave is just as sharp as their first shave. There's no reasons not to try Harry's. Harry's has the highest customer satisfaction in the shaving industry, and they're still offering a no-risk trial. Don't like your shave? No worries. It's on them. Right now, get your best shave ever all year long with Harry's razors and skincare products. Get a $13 starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. That's harrys.com/NFL for a $3 starter set. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to jump into part 2 of the crossover edition. David Droegemeier from Locked On Chargers joins the show. We talked all things storylines in segment number 1. Now it's time to talk about matchups. Where's a few matchups that we'll be really paying attention to in this game coming up on Sunday, Chargers and Raiders at SoFi Stadium. Here's part 2 of our conversation talking about the biggest matchups.
All right, we are back here on Crossover Thursday. Locked On Chargers host David Droegemeier here with your boy Q, Locked On Raiders host. And Q, it's time to get into the biggest matchups that we are going to see, that we are looking forward to in this football game. A lot of premium players on both sides of the ball here. I think the biggest matchup for me, most important matchup for me, is going to be the rookie, Quentin Johnston, going up against the Raiders secondary. This is a very, very important matchup for the Chargers because, unfortunately, they did lose wide receiver Mike Williams to a torn ACL for the entire season. So, and honestly, I think going into this season, Q, we kind of understood that for Quentin Johnston to get his opportunity with the two $20 million wide receivers that you had already in the building, that it was going to have to take some kind of an injury before he got any substantial snaps. Well, he's going to have to come in. He's going to have to make plays right away because, I'm sure that nobody in that building missed what Keenan Allen did to the Vikings secondary last week. And there's a giant red target on Keenan Allen's back. So they're going to try to do everything that they can to take him away. And so Quentin Johnston, the Temple product, is going to have to step up and make some plays.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for Quentin. I was excited when he went to TCU, excited that they played in the national championship game. I saw him when he was at the Combine, got to hang out with him. I covered him in high school, as you know, there in Temple, Texas. And so I'm excited for him. I'm excited to see what this matchup looks like, and from my understanding and just from what I've been able to see briefly, he hasn't had the greatest start to his NFL career yet, but I know he's a big play guy, right? And I mean, I saw it firsthand up close and personal, so I know he could be a big play maker. So if Mike Williams is not there and Quentin Johnson is put into that task, how do you think that, Kellen Moore uses him? Is it really just still go for the big play, or is it more maybe kind of the small intermediate passes and hope that he gets those yak yards that he's so good at?
Yeah, I think that's really where it is. I mean, Q, you studied Quentin. You know what he does with the ball in his hands, right? He forced over 40 missed tackles throughout his college career at TCU. Just simply one of the most dangerous receivers in all of college football when he was playing. So I don't think the best use of his talent is just to send him deep and try to go track the football. He can do that. He has that skill set, but he's explosive with the ball in his hands. So you need to manufacture some quick opportunities to get him in space with some blockers, not necessarily a wide receiver screen every time. But the one thing I've noticed just watching Quentin is if you're able to manufacture a runway for him, he can run away from anybody on the field. He has those nice long strides. I think I would like to see more of those opportunities. Get him in space, let him operate, because he really is he's a wide receiver, but he turns into a running back when he's got the ball in his hands. As far as the Raiders are concerned, what is a matchup in this football game that you are paying attention to that you think could have an impact on how this game turns out?
Well, honestly, I think this game is won and lost in the trenches. I really do.
Always.
For the Raiders, I really feel like I've said that the last few weeks, but their offensive line has just not been where it needs to be. And we mentioned earlier in segment number 1 about the lack of physicality from the Raiders offensive line. I want to see if they're up to the challenge. I mean, look, the Chargers defense might not have been playing at the level that it's supposed to, but they've got some pass rushers that Raider Nation's very familiar with, right? There's definitely some pass rushers. That offensive line's got to step up. And not only do they have to slow down the pass rush of the Chargers, they've got to open up some holes for Josh Jacobs. He's got to get rolling. It cannot be a game. Jimmy G, Brian Hoyer, Aiden O'Connell, I don't think any three of those dudes are guys that should drop back and throw the ball 45 times around the yard and think that they're going to win a game. They've got to, this offense has got to be balanced. So that offensive line has got a tall task in front of them. They've got to slow down the edge rushers and the pass rushers in general of the Chargers, and they've got to be able to open up some lanes to let Josh Jacobs run the rock, Zamir White run the rock. Whoever wants to run the rock, I don't care. Somebody's got to be able to get things cooking and take a little bit of pressure off of whoever the quarterback is on Sunday. So for me, the biggest matchup, and it's not even close, is going to be the Raiders offensive line and the Chargers defense. Like, that offensive line has got to go out there, feel good about themselves when the game is over, almost feel like they dominated if the Raiders have a chance to win this one. So I know it's a huge point spread in this game. Maybe the offensive line should take that personally and go out there and put their will on the Chargers defensive line if they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, the odds makers obviously don't watch AFC West football if they really think that that's going to be the result of this football game. I mean, come on now. The Chargers, close. Raiders, the Broncos, the Chiefs, they know each other so well. They play very close, very physical football games every single time. I mean, it's like going in the backyard and wrestling your brother. You know who he is. You know what he's going to try to do to you. So you got to try to outsmart him or just outperform him. That's really what it's going to be all about. I think another matchup I'm obviously paying very, very close attention to is staying in the trenches on the offensive side for the Chargers, and the defensive side for the Raiders is Trey Pipkins going up against Max Crosby, because that's going to be the matchup. They don't really move Max very much from what I've seen. Occasionally they'll throw him on the left side, try to get him on the left tackle. But in this football game, I don't really foresee that being the case very much, because Slater Island is very much a real thing, and he is back in full force. He's been just absolutely dominant through the first 3 weeks of this season. So obviously everybody knows that. So they're going to try to set up the matchup that's most advantageous for them. And of course, that's Max Crosby going up against Trey Pipkins. And that's always been a battle that's going to determine how this game goes. I mean, Max Crosby rushes like his hair is on fire. Like, he is an absolute whirlwind. He is a Tasmanian devil like Thule. He's a guy that you got to get in his way. You got to get multiple blockers in front of him. If they do not, he absolutely has the ability to wreck the game.
Yeah, he does. And a lot of teams are trying to make sure that 98 doesn't wreck the game, right? And
Yeah.
Buffalo, a couple of weeks ago, they made sure that they took him completely out of the game. They did a good job with that. Last week against Pittsburgh, he still was able to get home and get to Kenny Pickett. So he is that guy that plays with his hair on fire. And so that's definitely going to be a really good matchup. And the Raiders defense kind of goes how Max Crosby goes. But, for another matchup for me, I'm just going to look at what you kind of mentioned. You mentioned Quentin Johnson in the secondary. I'm just going to look at the wide receivers for the Chargers and the Raiders secondary, right? I think that's very important. Jacorian Bennett is a 4th-round pick out of Maryland, so he probably will end up getting matched up on Quentin Johnson quite a bit. Marcus Peters is old wily veteran. He may be on Keenan Allen, but the thing is, these corners don't travel. So, I mean, they're going to line up where they line up, right? And so wherever Keenan Allen lines up, if it's in the slot, he'll have Nate Hobbs on him. If it's out there on the right side, Jacorian Bennett will be on him. If he's on the left side, it'll be Peters. I mean, it's I'm on my side, you're on your side. You get that cat, I got this cat. I mean, that's just how it goes. So the Raiders secondary hasn't caused any turnovers yet. They're one of 2 teams in the league that haven't created a turnover. They've had an opportunity in each of the 3 games, but 2 times it got called back because of penalties, and then 1 time Peters put one on the ground. So, I mean, it's just they've had the opportunity. They just haven't come up with it, and that's a big deal too, right? For the Raiders to win this game, they're going to have to come up with a couple turnovers and I think have a couple short fields for the offense that, again, like I mentioned, haven't really got started. So the secondary against the Chargers' offensive weapons is also another matchup I'm looking for.
100%. I mean, that's interesting that they don't travel because that's one of the things with the Chargers offense is they're going to try to move Keenan Allen around. Like they use motion a lot. They move him from the slot to outside. I mean, they put him at the X, they put him at the Y. They're trying to get him in the most advantageous situation possible. So it's interesting to know that the Raiders corners don't really travel. That's going to be an interesting one to see how Keenan Allen is able to follow up the performance that he was able to have in week 3 against the Vikings.
So there was part 2 of our conversation right there, talking about the biggest matchups coming up in this game that's going to be played at SoFi Stadium. Of course, the Chargers and the Raiders, David Droegemeier and your boy Q. Coming up in segment number 3, we're going to get down to what is it going to take? What has to happen for the Chargers? What has to happen for the Raiders to improve to 2-2 overall? Both teams come in at 1-2. Both teams would love to leave SoFi at 2-2, especially the Raiders. That'd be 2 wins in the AFC West. The Chargers, they're about to go into their bye week, so you know that they want to get a win as well. But that's all coming up in segment number 3, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about PrizePicks. And you're probably saying, well, what's PrizePicks? Well, glad you asked. It's the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. You don't have to battle thousands of players, pros, sharks, none of that. It's you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's just that simple. There's all kind of quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. PrizePicks is real simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. And again, it's the most fun that a lot of people have had. They win up to 25 times their money in the football season. Again, select 2 or more players, pick more or less of their projected stats, and place your entry just like that. What you got to do right now is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for our first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for our first deposit. It is simple as that. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to close things out strong. Get into what it's going to take to get a victory at SoFi Stadium on Sunday. What is it going to take for the Chargers? What is it going to take for the Raiders? David Droegemeier from Locked On Chargers, him and Daniel Wade do a fantastic job, and of course myself holding it down for Locked On Raiders. Let's jump into part 3 of that conversation, talking about what it's going to take for these 2 teams to find a way to get a victory on Sunday. Here's part 3 of the conversation.
All right, guys, we are back here on Crossover Thursday, talking some Chargers, talking some Raiders, AFC West matchups here. And Q, we're rolling on, going on towards the end of this one. So it's time to talk about what each one of these teams need to do to win this football game on Sunday. Both 1-2 teams, both very desperate for a win. The Chargers going into their bye week, they need this one. This one is crucial. I mean, I think both of the teams here need to get this victory.
How big would that be, though? As you mentioned, the Chargers going into their bye in week 5. If they were to get that victory, have a 2-game winning streak, and then head into their bye, how big would that be for not only the confidence, but also to be able to go and get healthy and get ready for the second stretch of the season?
Oh, it's absolutely massive. And I think it's most important for the head coach, Brandon Staley, because right now the pitchforks and the lighted torches, they are definitely out. The Charger fans are tired of Brandon Staley and it's really just the defense. I think procedurally, for the most part, I think he makes good decisions. His clock management is good. He's aggressive, which, you're going to live and die by that aggression. But that defense, which, he was touted as a defensive savant, a defensive guru, if you will, his defense has not performed up to that standard or anywhere close to that. So if anybody needs this victory, it's Brandon Staley more than anybody else. But yeah, I mean, this is this win here for both teams has the opportunity to allow them to kind of get back to ground zero, to be able to reset and then to really be able to go out there and challenge the rest of your season.
Yeah, no doubt. And, for the Raiders, if they were to pick up a victory in this one, it'd be their second one in the AFC West. They won week 1 against Denver. So if they were to pick up a victory on Sunday against the Chargers, they're feeling good. They've got 2 AFC victories and 2 AFC West victories. Now, does that mean that means they're going to run away with the victory? No, I mean, but it says that they stay pace, right? They're staying pace with the rest of the division, which is all that you could ask for through 4 weeks. So, yeah, I think for this game and for these two teams, this is a huge game, one way or the other. And somebody's going to come out on the right side of things and someone else is going to be licking their wounds and wondering what the hell happened.
That's right. That's right. Well, for the Chargers, what the Chargers need to do to win this game is they need to force this game to turn messy. They need to get into Jimmy G's face or whoever is going to be playing quarterback. They need to make sure that pace that they've set, getting 9 sacks in the last 2 games and getting all kinds of pressure, especially on third down, they need to make sure that trend continues. Also, the Raiders, unfortunately, they've had a propensity to turn the football over, whether it's fumbles, whether it's interceptions. When, Jimmy G's in that situation where he's got pressure in his face, he kind of throws it up. So the Chargers absolutely have to be in a position to capitalize on those turnovers and turn them into points, and not just points, but touchdowns. You have to make that hurt. I think that's what the Chargers need to do to make sure that they are able to come out of this week with a win. What about the Raiders? What do the Raiders have to do to win this game?
Well, I'll tell you real quick before I even tell you what the Raiders have to do. Those 2 points that you just brought up, getting sacks, getting in Jimmy G's face and creating turnovers as well, is what has happened so far this season, right? Yeah. Last week, Sunday night, he got sacked 4 times. He had gone the first 2 games without getting a sack. But last Sunday night, man, 4 sacks. The Steelers were all over him, and they came away with 3 interceptions. Now he leads the league in interception with 6. So, and the Raiders have 7 turnovers because they put 1 on the ground as far as a fumble as well. So those are great points right there. Great recipe. And well, unfortunately for the Raiders, that's something that they've had a tendency to do as of so far in the season. So that's really playing right into the Chargers' hand for what they want to do. Now, on the flip side, for the Raiders, what they need to do if they're going to get this victory is they've got to be as balanced as possible. They can't turn the ball over, right? They just can't. But they've got to be balanced, man. They've got to be able to feed Devontae, feed Jacoby, get Hunter involved. I mean, he's a really good player who hasn't got involved yet this season. But they've got to be able to run the rock, man. They've got to be able to run the rock. If you can't run the rock, those guys that want to get after the quarterback are going to pin their ears back. They're going to be slobbering. It's going to be all drool going down their chins and everything. Khalil Mack is going to be ready to eat. Bosa's going to be ready to eat. I mean, everyone's going to say, okay, let's go. You're one-dimensional. If you're a one-dimensional team, you're not going to get it done. So, man, they've got to protect the ball. They've got to have a balanced offense. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to see them come up with some turnovers, but I would take just being balanced and being able to protect the ball. If they do those 2 things, well, let the chips fall where they may, right? But after that Sunday night game, all those turnovers and getting Jimmy G killed, and he's obviously in concussion protocol right now, they've just got to start with the basics. And I think the basics would be controlling the ball, holding on to the ball, as far as, not turning it over. And then also just having a balanced offense, passing the rock and being able to run the rock.
Yeah, well, the Raiders want to shorten this game, right? They want to make sure that they limit how many times Justin Herbert can touch the football. And the best way to do that is by running the ball with Josh Jacobs and churning that clock and having those long, sustained drives where they're able to stay ahead of the sticks and not allow the Chargers to get into those exotic blitz packages that Brandon Staley does like to use on 3rd and longs to great success. So that's definitely going to be something that the Chargers are going to have to do. This is a real test going up against one of the better running backs in the league. And you can't let him figure it out this week, right? You can't let him figure it out this week because that's exactly what the Raiders want to do. They want to kind of set up Jimmy G's plays to where, you don't know if it's going to be a run or pass because you've had to defend the run so often throughout this football game. The one thing we know overall, Q, is this is going to be a close game. This is going to be a physical game, and it's going to be a game that's going to determine really how one of these teams goes about the rest of their season.
So there it is. There it was. That is the crossover edition. It's always fun to catch up with the other host of the Locked On show for the next opponent, just to kind of get an idea of what they're thinking, what they're hearing, how they're feeling about the team. And, so really good stuff with David Droegemeier. Definitely appreciate him, just kind of riding along shotgun with me on the show. So that's that show. Tomorrow, I'll give you my keys to victory, what I think is going to take for the silver and black. Maybe we'll have a little bit more clarity on what's going to go on with Jimmy G, who's going to be the quarterback behind center. There's going to be a lot to get to on Friday's show. And, of course, we'll get into calls and texts, Locked On Raider Podcast voicemail line. We didn't get any on today's show, but we'll definitely jump back into that on Friday's show as we close out the week really strong. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.